audience that wishes to speak with the board, we do have public input cards available, and I believe they're on a podium on the outside of this particular room as you open the door. This does afford you a 3-minute opportunity to speak to your topic, and I want to thank Mr. Wage because he totally filled out his input card with his address and his concern and whether he was in support or opposition. So thank you very, very much. Madam Superintendent, I'm going to open,
Yes.
and then you will follow up. I declare this meeting as a public hearing of the School Board of Lake County, Florida, for the adoption of the tentative millage rates and the tentative budget for the 2013-14 fiscal year. Superintendent, please read the statement required on millage for the record.
The first substantive issue to be discussed is the rolled back rate. The total millage to be levied is less than the rolled back rate by 2.57%. The required local effort millage rate to be levied is less than the rolled back rate by 3.48%.
Thank you very much. This, as I stated, is a public hearing. At this time, we're to ask, does anyone wish to address the board concerning this decrease? And at this time, Mr. Jeffrey Wage.
All right. My addressing of this is kind of broad. It's both for this item and the one that we'll be discussing next. Before I get into that, once again, I'm against it. I'm against anything that doesn't bring revenue into the county.
Mr. Wage,
yes.
I need to ask you for the record to
Oh, I'm sorry.
give your
My name's
address.
Jeffrey Wage, 437 Laura Lane in Mount Dora.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry. Once again, I'm against anything that doesn't bring revenue into this county. And maybe the confusion is because I'm a teacher in this county. And in 2009 and 2010, I didn't get my step raise. That means the county is getting my experience, my expertise, yet I'm not being paid for that. At this point right now, there are 3 Ds. I feel disrespected, discouraged, and disappointed, much like Dr. Moxley does, about the letter C grade this county has got. There's a morale issue in this county. You may not know it, but it's there. I'm speaking for the teachers. I've talked to them. If this doesn't get fixed with the kind of school year we have coming up, then it can only get worse. Let's go for another D, as in D for the school year. Teachers work very, very hard. Dr. Moxley, in a June workshop, spoke about her administrators. They're working 60 hours a week. They have evaluations they have to deal with. They have a lot of pressure on them. That's exactly what I would say as a teacher. They keep their $100,000 pay. Unfortunately, the teachers in this county don't. We get nothing. I feel very disrespected, as most teachers do. And the problem with this is that the administrators are at the top 20 in the state of Florida, and the teachers at the bottom 20 in the state of Florida when we talk about the rates of Lake County. Embarrassing. When aides can apply for food stamps, embarrassing. You guys are up here to lead, and you're doing a very poor job of it, in my opinion. I know you have a tough job. I know you have to do things you have to do. But if we don't need the money in this county, then why don't I have my steps? Why isn't this done tomorrow? I don't understand that. You're holding money in reserve that is basically my money. You're holding it there in case you need it. I don't blame you. But it's my money. I've earned it. I've worked it. There's no excuse. Now, some of you haven't been on the board as long as I've been in this school system. I've been here 9 years. And I would like to think that I can walk out of here being respected. We have, let's see, this is my time. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. At this time, we're going to have a brief presentation by our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Bob. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
This tentative budget hearing is in some manner a formality.
Thank you.
On the 18th, we received the certified millage rates from the legislature. Those are the rates that you are being asked to levy this evening in the tentative process. You are not allowed to deviate from those rates. They are set by the legislature and by the Department of Education. If you do not levy the rates that they have set forth for you, you do not participate in the matching funds that come from the state. So we will go through this process, and we'll ask you to go through the millages. Each one, we have to approve the millages first, then we move towards the budget. Our second hearing is scheduled currently for September 10th, 9th, at 5:30. That will be part of the rest of the process. The point I try to make here to the board is these millage rates are set by the legislature, by the Department of Education. They are not set by the board, and we really don't have any control over them.
And you were going to speak to
The shrimp procedure, yes, ma'am. On Friday, we had the full page ad in the paper.
Microphones, please.
What?
Can't hear you.
Oh, it's not on? Sorry. Is that better? It's on. We had a full page ad in the daily commercial as required. We had it approved by Department of Revenue before we placed the advertisement, and it meets all the legal requirements of trim. Again, this is our first of 2 public hearings. What we ask you today to do is approve the tentative millage rate and the tentative budget. And on September 9th, we will approve final millage rates and ask you to approve the final budget for the 13-14 school year.
Thank you very much. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, at this time, I recommend that the Board adopt Resolution 2013-05, determining tentative millages to be levied for the fiscal year 2013-2014. Included are required local effort of 4.922 mils, basic discretionary of 0.748 mils, and capital outlay millage of 1.500 mils. This is for a total of 7.170 mils. The revenues that will be generated by this levy total general operating $89,717,731, capital outlay of $23,734,850, for a total of $113,452,581.
Thank you very much, Madam Superintendent. May I have a motion on the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve Resolution 2013-05, determining tentative millages for the fiscal year 2013-2014 as stated.
So moved. Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded, and once again, this is a public hearing. Thank you. And our learned attorney, does that meet the requirements?
We'd ask if anybody here this evening, Madam Chairman, who wishes to address the board concerning the millages that were just read, they can come forward and make a statement at this time.
Thank you. I just wanted that statement that we have done that. Thank you. Madam Superintendent, we need a vote?
Yes.
All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried unanimously. Now, Madam Superintendent.
Yes. Board members, I recommend that the Board approve Resolution 2013-06, adopting the tentative budget for the 2013-14 fiscal year in the amount of $530,108,503.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion on the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve Resolution 2013-06 to adopt the tentative budget for the 2013-14 fiscal year in the amount of $530,108,000, excuse me, you read it again,
$108,503.
Right.
Second.
Second, thank you very much. This also is a public hearing. Mr. Wage, you spoke once.
Am I able to speak twice? You can do more of the same.
Well, come on.
Okay.
Go get 'em.
Thank you very much for letting me speak again. Let's see, where did I leave off? I think most teachers worked the 2013 year in good faith. They worked hard. May not have been the outcome may not have been what we really wanted it to. But I think we worked very hard. And in reference to what we're talking about here as far as money goes, if we don't need the money in the county, that's great. I'm against them higher taxes. If we don't need an impact fee on houses, great. We don't need that. But if we can't fund the responsibilities out there, or won't fund the responsibilities out there, I'm confused then. At this point, I think the board needs to think about not only the things they're voting on right now, but also how teachers are feeling. I may be a single voice in the ocean out here, but believe me, I speak volumes as far as what I've heard. Something has to change here. I think the mentality of the county has to change. Attending that workshop, we use sports as a way to encourage students to stay in school. I'm not necessarily thinking that's the right mentality. Sports keep students in school, but when they graduate, what do? Go to McDonald's? Nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, if you change the mentality in the county, that education is what you want, not sports. You have to go from here, grassroots, the leaders, out there. That has to be changed. If that's not changed, then sports is always going to be, football is going to be far more important than learning. And that's just wrong. 95 or 99% of the students that play football, that's their last time. Enjoy it. What I want to also say is, as you probably know in business, happy employees equals high productivity. Unhappy employees leads to low productivity. It's that simple. Is there a correlation with the letter C that we've gotten for our county? Could be. It's really something I want you to think about. It wouldn't take too much to make teachers happy, especially with the step that's sitting out there. So I guess in closing, I'll keep this short for my second time. Don't put a wedge between a school board and the teachers. Don't use the students as that wedge. And that's what's happening here. You have to think about this. I might be the only voice out here passionately trying to discuss this to you, or express this to you, but this is just the beginning for me then. You have to think about students and the people who are teaching the students. The administrators may not even know the students' names. The teachers do. Yeah, we probably earned that seat.
Thank you very much. Board members, there is a motion and a second. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Madam Superintendent.
I recommend that the board declare that the final budget hearing for the approval of final millage rates and budget for the 2013-14 fiscal school year be scheduled to be held on Monday, September 9th, 2013, in the Lake County Commission chambers at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion and the superintendent's recommendation that the board declare that the final budget hearing for the approval of final millage rates and budget for the 2013-14 fiscal year be scheduled to be held on Monday, September 9th, 2013, in the Lake County Commission chambers at 5:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Brandenburg, seconded by Ms. Stivender. All those in favor, please signify by...
Madam Chairman.
Excuse me, this is a public hearing again. Is there another person that would like to speak? And this is on the time frame for the second hearing. There being none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, thank you very much. This, Madam Superintendent?
Yes, this concludes the required action for the first public hearing on the 2013-14 tentative millage rates and budgets for the Lake County schools.
Thank you very much. budget, I would adjourn this meeting. And we then move to I'd like to get
Wasn't very good.
I've been attending it myself.
Board members, I'd like to call this special school board meeting once again back in order. And this is a new portion of that meeting. And we have a topic tonight, 2.01 and 2.02. Madam Superintendent, I'm going to let you go through this.
Yes, Mrs. Fisher, members of the board, we do have a few items that are time sensitive for the start of the school year. The first one is 2.01. This is a special meeting, so you are able to take action on this item. This is an overnight field trip to Haines City, Florida for grade middle school students. They're FFA students, and they will be attending the FFA Outdoor Adventures Conference that's held August 7th through the 10th. This is before the school year starts, and they run it through their FFA program at the school. So at this time, I'd like to recommend approval for the grade middle school FFA students and the agri-science teacher to participate in an overnight field trip to Haines City, Florida on August 7th through the 10th, 2013 to attend the Florida Outdoor Adventures Conference. This is being brought to your attention because Haines City is in a contiguous county.
Thank you very much. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion and support?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Howard, seconded by Ms. Stuyvesant. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. 2.02.
2.02, and this one, I know we're doing by separate cover. Ms. Brandenburg will need to file a conflict of interest statement if she's so noticed. At this time, this is the dual enrollment agreement that we do each year with Lake Sumter State College. And I see Dr. Mojok and Dr. Howard in our audience, so we want to recognize you for being here and thank you. We have been working diligently, our staff, and I see there are some staff members from Lake Sumter and from Lake County School Boards that have been working with this particular articulation agreement. And board members, as y'all know, there were changes to the statute and legislative action that took place here at the very end of the session. And we do have an August 1st deadline. We did come to conclusion on this, and I do want to say to all the staff members from both organizations, I appreciate their commitment, their dedication, and their willingness to work through and have that ongoing dialogue. To Dr. Mojok and Dr. Howard, thank you for your ongoing collaboration and our partnership. We value that very much. So, board members, you do have a copy of this agreement. And has gone through council, and Mr. Brianna worked with us on it, and I know that Lake Sumter has given it to their council. The Board of Trustees did take action on this about a week and a half ago, and at this time I'm going to put my recommendation on the floor. Again, Dr. Mojok is also available to answer any questions as I am as we work through this. So at this time I'd like to recommend approval of the dual enrollment agreement between Lake Sumter State College and the Lake County School Board for the 2013-14 school year as presented in board docs.
Thank you so very much. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
The motion has been moved by Ms. Stuyvesant, seconded by Mr. Mathias. Open to discussion. There being none, those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please make note that Ms. Brandenburg did not issue a vote, but did issue her conflict of interest. 2.03.
Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
2.03, this is a agreement that we are bringing forth. It's an agreement for contractor services. This is with the new teacher center, and this is dealing with the teacher induction. This is a multi-year instructional coaching framework that will be training coaches to work with new teachers as we start our initiative to support for teacher induction in the recruitment process and the retention. This is a retention strategy. And so at this time, I'd like to recommend that the school board approve the new teacher center agreement for accelerating new teacher development as part of our teacher recruitment and retention efforts for teacher induction in Lake County schools.
Thank you very much. You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Brandenburg. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Howard. Discussion? Seeing no one wish to speak, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried unanimously.
Agenda items 2.04 and 2.05 are on the same topic, and board members, I would recommend that we probably want to deal with those together. So just for a starting point, and if that's the pleasure of the board chair, how you'd like to proceed with these.
I spoke with the superintendent last week about these particular items, and I could see the advantage of hearing 2.05 first and then moving into 2.04, and the chair will work at the pleasure of the board. And
That's fine.
okay, may we hear 2.05 first?
Absolutely.
And that is the presentation on, Madam Superintendent.
Yes, we have a presentation on capital funding alternatives, and this afternoon we have Stanley Geberer. Is that correct? Thank you very much, and welcome to you. And Mr. Geberer is from Fishkind and Associates, and we're going to ask if you'll please have a seat up at the front table here. If you'll pull the mic close to you so that everyone can hear you, and we'll let you go ahead and start your presentation. I think they're pulling something up on the computer for you.
Mr. Geberer, to begin with, can you give us some background on your firm?
Sure.
I'm sure it's a part of your presentation, but I'd really like to hear it number one.
Sure. My name is Stan Geberer. Thanks for inviting us here. Good evening, everybody. My company is Fishkind and Associates. We're an economic consulting firm based in Orlando, Florida. Our firm originated back in 1987, and we have about 35 members of the firm currently in 3 offices located in Orlando, Naples, and Port St. Lucie. Our business is split up into 4 major categories. One is market analysis and economic forecasting. Another is fiscal impact analysis, which is the economic impacts of growth to local government. Third is expert witness testimony and litigation. So when all those market projects get into trouble, we can go to court with them. And then the fourth, is special district financing. For about 30 years, we've been managers of special finance districts, as well as the financial advisor to those districts, developing methodologies for funding special assessments within community development districts, mosquito control districts, and other water management districts. So that's a little bit about our firm. I've been with the firm since 1988 in most all of those capacities.
And I do have a question, general information. When you're speaking of those special finance districts, those did encompass public school system?
Yes, it did, and it does. We've also created educational facilities districts, and we work closely with charter school organizations as well to examine funding alternatives for charter schools throughout the state and also in other states of the Union.
Board members, I want to thank Mr. Mathias for bringing this to our attention, and I'll step back now and let the gentleman speak, but I did want to have that background.
Well, thanks again for inviting us today. The presentation is kind of short because there's probably not all that much new, but I think it also gives us an opportunity to have some good dialogue and some question and answer. So I'd encourage the discussion, and let's talk about some of the alternatives. So, the first page is options which come from the 5-year master plan. And these are of School Board of Lake County. And these include a number of different types of alternatives, but to some degree they include funding and financing. And to some extent, the funding and the financing issues have been a little bit confused. What we've chosen to do is kind of separate these out into more realistic funding options, where funding is the opportunity to raise new money, and finance is kind of moving money from here to there. So what we're really trying to focus on is funding and looking for ways to raise new revenues, and that's really the key going on here. Within the realistic funding options category, we think there are 3 main categories. The slide before that had a lot of these different categories kind of lumped all together, but we've separated them out here into impact fees, special assessments, and voter-approved millage or general obligation bonds. It's been our experience that over the past 15 years or so, that increased millage, general obligation bonds, and increased sales taxes are very, very difficult to pass to get the voter approval that you need. Orange County voter-approved school board funding has gone down a couple of times. I think Seminole County did approve it this past election cycle, but after it was defeated for a couple of election cycles. You all know the drill probably better than I do. It's very difficult to get that voter support. So the more realistic opportunities to raise new money is impose impact fees, impose special assessments. Well, impact fees and special assessments are the main ones that are left. So on the impact fee side, impact fees are very common throughout the state. They're used for a wide variety of different infrastructure requirements, including roads, water, sewer, schools, other kinds of infrastructure. They're tried and true. They're politically popular because generally they impose the fees on people who aren't here yet, who don't really have much of a say to say, no, we don't want you to impose those fees. So it's easy to impose the fees on the people who aren't here yet. Problems with impact fees is that it's not a bondable source. By a bondable source, we mean it's not a source where you can count on a steady revenue stream and then take that revenue stream to a financial institution and say, look, we get $1 million a year in impact fees, give us $10 million in bond money, and we'll guarantee you the $1 million a year, because you can't really count on the $1 million a year. It is non-predictable, and in a lot of places from all through Central Florida, from Pasco to Martin to Alachua, impact fee revenues over the past 5 years have been really volatile. And so they're simply not a bondable source. You can't count on them. The result is that you're always behind on school board construction. And this has happened with roads as well, which means we collect impact fees and we put them in an escrow account until we have enough to build, and then we go build. By the time we collect all of the money to build, we could be 3 to 5 years behind the program in terms of what we need and when we need it to build this. It hinders economic growth because it's a large one-time fee. Many of the counties in the state impact fees, for example, in Osceola County, South Osceola County impact fees can exceed $24,000 on a home. So on an average priced home of $250,000, that's 10% of the purchase price. It's double or triple the price of a mortgage. So impact fees hinder growth. It raises home prices. It raises your mortgage fees. And then finally, we conduct these impact fee studies to determine what the impact fee should be. And typically, in the ordinances, it says this will be updated periodically, or yearly, or whenever. But it's politically unpopular to update the study because usually that means the fees are going to go up. And so these impact fee studies, which set the fees, in the case of Lake County in 2011, probably based on 2010 data, you're already 3 or 4 years out of date. And so we're behind the curve. And this, happened to occur at a time in 2010 when materials and construction prices were relatively low. There was a surplus of materials because we weren't building anything, and now prices are starting to go up. So you got to get a double whammy, which is not only the reports are outdated, but the prices of materials have changed dramatically. And so there's a real imbalance in a lot of places between what we charge for impact fees and what the real impact fee is. And so you collect them, but you still don't have enough to build what you need to build. So these are some of the problems with impact fees, and that's why impact fees are generally not favored by us as economists. What we do favor are special assessments. We've been involved in the creation of community development districts and the funding of about $4 billion worth of Florida infrastructure over the past 25 or 30 years using the special assessment program. So we're very familiar with how districts work, what the pitfalls and the foibles of districts are, and there are plenty of those. And we know how they can work effectively not to hinder development. So the types of special assessments that you have available are special assessments funded through community development districts, CDDs, special assessments through educational facilities benefit districts, or special assessments or benefit assessments which can be imposed through an MSBU or simply impose a Chapter 170 special assessment. So there's 4 different ways that special assessments can be imposed. And in general, we would argue for or look towards keeping an impact fee program in place. So that means that any new development that occurs that is not within a special district also has to pay. And that nobody who's under the radar, small developments or just one home, doesn't really escape the requirement to pay. So we would recommend keeping the impact fee program in place. That way it requires everybody to pay. And then allow special districts, however we create them, through educational facilities or community development districts, allow special districts to convert the amount due in impact fees to a special assessment fee. And that could be a school fee, or it could be a direct property special assessment fee, or other kind of special assessment that the county simply imposes. What this does is it gives new development the flexibility to utilize a financing mechanism which can raise money and not have to wrap those assessments into the price of the home. It's a special assessment which is in the form of a property tax. In some instances, and community developments allow for this, in some instances, the special assessment can be an additional sales tax. And so in the case of retail development, we've imposed a sales tax as opposed to a special assessment. So these are the types of alternatives that are available. Generally, they're very effective at raising money. They offer the opportunity for private-public partnerships, in that sometimes developers will say, yes, I know that I'm going to have to impose this impact fee on all of my new homes, and I'm going to impose it in the form of a special assessment, but I'm going to share it I'm not going to pass that entire fee to the new residential. And so that gives developers an opportunity to kind of make a public-private partnership which says, I'm only going to pass through 90% of this special assessment. I'm going to pay off 10% or 20% at the time of sale, or at the time of building permit, or at some other time that they choose, or at the time when the developer, say, sells a block of 50 to a large national home builder. They can get some additional revenue and pay off a portion of that assessment. So there's a lot of opportunities for special districts to create public-private partnerships and encourage kind of a joint agreement to pay for these facilities. At the end of the day, there is no magic bullet. We're all asked very often for what are the alternatives to obtaining the funding that we need. Can't you do something? And the answer is, you have to raise the money. But, from our perspective, it's really commendable that the county and the school board agreed to school concurrency in the comprehensive plan. It's really important, and it raises the level and quality of life which folks in the community are talking about. And it emphasizes the fact that we're not just having development willy-nilly everywhere. We're actually going to encourage those developers and those new homes to have school facilities with them. And we think that's the way it ought to be done. It's done in Orange County, and it's been very effective. So it's laudable to do that. It increases the cost, and it puts a burden on the school board as far as the timing goes. So the development is approved, the development starts to occur, and if there is a concurrency requirement that says the facilities have to be in place at the time we start this development or at the time you're approved, but the revenues don't show up for some years down the road. So it's not so much a question of can we raise the money, it's more a question of timing. And so what these special districts do is they help you solve the timing problem. When you look at the ad valorem tax generation, the fiscal impact analysis of it, and we do a lot of those, when you look at the fiscal impact analysis of new development, they generally raise enough revenue in total over the development period of the community to pay for all the school facilities. They just don't do it now. So it's a timing question. And special districts really go a long way to solving that timing. So I think that pretty much concludes where what we had to say on a prepared basis, and happy to talk about some more and answer questions.
Thank you. Mr. Matthias, you brought this to the board's attention. I'd like you to start board discussion.
And I'd like to also recognize we have Bill Benham who chaired the CPAC committee, and I didn't know if he brought anything he wanted to share. If it was okay, if he moved up,
If Mr. Benham would like to speak, I acknowledge that Mr. Benham was in the audience, and that's up to Mr. Benham, and if he would fill out a card.
Right. Oh, okay. All right. Then explain to me, I'm going to talk directly to the subject of the assessment. How do you get the money part of it? No, you said it's too little too late, and so how is that funded when you have this assessment if we needed a school in 3 years?
Okay, so let's say a new development is approved with 100 houses, and we have a new school requirement, which for the sake of discussion costs $100. So it's $1, in effect, $1 a house. And you need all $100 today, but we're not going to get the $100 until all 100 houses are built. So, 5 years or 3 years down the road, we may only have 50, so we're kind of short. When you impose community development district or an MSBU, that district is a unit of local government. In the instance of community development districts, the authorizing legislation is Chapter 190 of Florida statutes, and that is the basis by which community development districts are approved and authorized. And under Chapter 190, special districts such as Community Development District have the authority to levy and impose special assessments. They have the authority to levy and impose sales tax, and they have the authority to levy and impose a millage rate up to 2 or 3 mills. Typically, all of the CDDs we've worked in have never imposed a millage rate. They've only imposed a special assessment. And the special assessment, as I said, the district has the authority to levy the assessment. And the determination of the levy of the assessment is based on an engineering report which says, I need $100. I did the school survey, I need $100 to build a school. Here's the engineer's report. And then the Board of Supervisors of the special district says, we hereby levy a special assessment of $1 a house on each of these homes. That district also has the authority to issue revenue bonds, to issue special assessment revenue bonds. So now they've levied an assessment and they found an engineering need in the engineering report. They take that to the bond market and they say, bond market, we're going to get $1 a year from all of these 100 houses that will be created. We want you to lend us $100 to build a school. The bond market says, here's your money, go build. We build schools. Now that we have schools, people want to live there, so they build houses and they pay their special assessments. During the period in which the homes are not sold, those vacant lands still have an assessment. And whoever owns that land has to pay that assessment. So whether it's Pulte Homes or whether it's the original developer or whether it's a local home builder, whoever is the owner of that land at the time is going to be responsible for that annual assessment. The nice thing about the annual assessment is if my next door neighbor decides he or she is not going to pay it, they can't take their dollar and make me pay it. The special assessments are levied according to an assessment methodology which describes how each unit will pay and what each unit will eventually and always be responsible for. And once you issue that bond and you make those declarations, you can't say, oh, we really wanted Bill Mathias to pay $2, not $1. So if the neighbor, in the case of the Great Recession over the past few years, where a lot of homes were foreclosed on, and a lot of homeowners associations saw their fees skyrocket because they still needed to raise the money to mow the lawn, but instead of raising it from 500 people, they could only raise it from 250 people, so they doubled everybody's assessment. Homeowners' assessments went through the roof, and it caused more bankruptcies and more foreclosures. That cannot happen with CDDs. So in that case, it's a more secure and a more fair assessment. It's also an assessment that is collected through the tax bill, through the uniform code, and it appears on the property appraiser's tax bill, or the tax collector's tax bill. And so if you don't pay the $1, they can sell tax certificates and take your home. In the case of homeowners assessments, there's no stick to say you have to pay. So people pay their property tax, but they never paid the HOA tax, and they let the HOA tax go on for years and years, unpaid. And so because we collect special assessments on the tax roll, it's a more secure method, which creates less problems in the long run in terms of the stability of these revenue bonds.
Yes, Ms. Scott. I'm familiar with the road special assessments because I was a county commissioner and we did that. And it went on their tax bill
Right.
over like a 7 to 10 year period, and
Right.
they paid on it every year. And if they foreclosed, like you said, then it came back and it got paid, it got sold.
Right.
So we got the money anyway.
That's
It
right.
was a secure funding source. Is this, the CDDs, are they similar to the penny sales tax? When we did that with the county, we got a third of it, then the school board at the time used that as bonding capacity to do the schools all at one time. Is that similar to what you're saying with the CDD? I just want to make sure I'm in the
In
same
terms of
mindset.
in terms of the stability of the revenue source, yes, we can bond the revenues that come from CDD.
Okay.
It's not the same in that it's not a sales tax.
Right. But it's the same theory, I mean.
Right.
Okay.
You can bond it.
The other question I have is, everything that you've explained, and we do have MSTUs and those type of things in South Lake County. We don't have them up here. We have a lot of smaller contractors who build one house, two houses. The CDDs do not cover them.
Right.
So whatever the impact fee that this board comes up with, that the Board of County Commissioners approve, is going to impact them totally different than it will residents in a CDD.
Right. Right.
So they're getting the full impact, and the CDD has a long range
Yep.
effect
that's-
on those property owners.
That's true.
Okay,
And-
how do you resolve that?
I don't know. It's a good question. But maybe that's something to think about as far as what is there a convertible mechanism to allow the small home builder to convert to some sort of an assessment like a CDD? Is there something we can do on a county-wide basis or on a zone-wide basis that can do that?
And the reason
I don't
I'm
know.
saying
It's a
that,
good
because
question.
the South End is growing again. I mean, we've been in the slump, and it's obvious, and he'll speak to that, he's the South End. But I am not for impact fees to begin with, and I've said that at every meeting, even though I get portrayed as something else. But I also am not for doing impact fees in one part of our county and not doing them in the other part, because that continues to make us not equal. The people in the North End don't feel like they're as important as people in the South End. And I don't want, when you're talking about students and student stations and the education of a student, we need equality, not separating one end of the county with the other. So is there a way to do, if you have the South End growing, is there a way to have them at a different rate than we have at the North End, just so that we can keep the ball rolling? You know what I'm trying to...
When you say different rate, a different impact fee rate?
That or some other system to catch the smaller developments. 5 lots is all somebody develops versus 500 in the South End. There's got to be, I mean, one size doesn't fit all here.
Right, right. I think, I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay. Is that something you can research?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It's a good question. And it would be important and helpful not only to Lake County but a lot of different places. So we'll take a look at that. As far as having a different rate or a different impact fee within the county, I suspect the state would probably not allow that.
That's what I thought.
So it's going to be one size fits all in terms of the cost per student station. The question is, can we find a different mechanism to fund it and finance it for non-district payers? And it does happen in other counties. It may happen in other counties for other types of infrastructure. So, for example, in Gainesville, they have mobility fees, and they have zones for mobility fees. And anybody who builds within that zone is subject to that mobility fee. But I'm not sure that that addresses the question of, do they have to pay it now, or can they pay it over time? How do we pay it over time is what your question is.
Yes.
So, and I don't know if mobility fees really address that.
Thank you.
Other questions, Ms. Brandon? And then Dr. Howard, you wish to speak?
How long does it take to set up one of these special districts? And who would be the one to do that?
The developer is typically the person who requests the formation of a special district. We can do them in as little as 4 months, usually somewhere between 4 and 6 months, to form a special district to meet all the statutory requirements in Chapter 190. You can have the planning department or the school board strongly encourage a new developer to create a special district. to help fund schools and explain to them that this is an option that is available to them so that they don't have to roll impact fees into the price of a home and don't have to pay them all at one time, and that you like that as an option. So that's a discussion that you can have with an applicant. At the end of the day, it's the county government, not the school board, who approves the district. So, or the city if it's in a municipality. So you probably would want to have some sort of a joint meeting with cities and counties to say, we would like this approach to happen. We would like to give development and new developers the opportunity to make these districts, if that's what you decide, and then have the county say, okay, we like that idea. We'll have, and we would approve them if they came to us for an educational facilities district or community development district.
Okay, but, you know, but we're looking, you know, that is a long-term plan, because we think the developer has been approved to develop 500 homes. They may be starting off at 2 or 3, you know, every couple of months. So you need to see the full impact of multiple homes being built, correct?
No, if you approve a new development with 500 homes, and they've gained their approvals and they've started to clear ground, they can still create a community development district or an educational facilities benefit district at that time and encumber that development. And there'd be no requirement that homes be built at that time or even that bonds are issued at that time.
Because we have a number of developments that have been approved.
Mm-hmm.
Now, very few are coming out of the ground, but there are multiple home sites that have already been approved by the county commission.
Right, and there's nothing that prohibits or precludes you from going back. In fact, it's better if you've already got the approvals, because then the assessment methodologies and the lenders of who lend the money for the bonds, the lenders have greater certainty that we're not issuing bonds based on some dream that somebody has of making a development. The development is already approved and ready to go, and somebody's actually made an investment, and they may have already put some other infrastructure in the ground. And so the value of that land is greater, so they're more comfortable saying, yeah, this is a real thing, and so, yeah, I'm more likely to lend for that. So it's fine to do that.
And who determines who sits on those development district boards?
The landowner. Could whoever the landowner is. It could be the developer himself, herself, or it could be whoever the landowner is. But it's landowner control for the first 2 years. And then as new residents and new landowners come into the district, the voting rights of landowners expands, and eventually the voting rights of landowners is subsumed by the voting rights of residents, and residents take over the district.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Howard?
Once we start collecting the assessments, how does that impact the requirement of the actual building and maintaining of the seats for that assessment? I mean, so once we enter into an agreement, at what point do our seats need to be built? Or is that on the front end? Is there a legal requirement on that, or?
That's probably the concurrency statute, whatever the requirement is in the comp plan that says you need a school at this time. That's when the district will build it.
Okay, but it's not included in the language for the special assessment, then?
No.
Okay.
No, and there's no, and if you form a district, you can form a district and never issue bonds. So If there's a development which is fully approved for 500 units, then there's no activity. We went back and we created a district on it. There would be no obligation or requirement to ever issue bonds until such time as we decided we were going to build a school. And you wouldn't get any lender to lend you money until you decided you were actually going to spend it to build a school.
And that, the reason I ask that is I do have a 1,000-unit development that's looking at coming in the south end, and they actually want their seats reserved, and they want to be able to say, here's our seats, they're already sitting there, and classrooms built, ready to go. And so it, this might be something that they were interested in.
Yeah, and if they are willing to take the risk that says, while I'm the landowner for these 1,000 homes, while I'm the landowner, I want to build my school right away because I know I'm going to sell 500 a year and I'll be out in 2 years, so I want it, right now. If they're willing to take that risk and they believe that they're going to sell 500 a year, then they should go ahead and issue the bonds, but they're on the hook for the special assessments. So, if it only ends up being 100 a year, they're the ones that have to pay, not the county and not other residents of the county.
Thank you. Madam Superintendent, do you and your staff have questions?
I do, and then I would like Mr. Fix and Mrs. McLeod, if they would like to. I want to make sure that I understood and comprehended, because I heard that this is, you have a combination, because it's not replacing impact fees 100% because of the areas that are not suitable for a community development type of system, if I understood that correctly.
Well, it's that, but you also want to make sure that that the developer of the 1,000-unit development still understands that whatever happens, they still have to pay. They have to pay something. If you take away the impact fees, then they say, why do I need to form a district? If I form no district, then I don't have to pay because you don't have impact fees. So you always want to have a little bit of a stick to say, you have to pay something. Everybody has to pay something.
And the amount of this board comes together, and when they do their assessment, it can be any amount. It doesn't have to mirror what the impact fee amount would be, or does it?
No, it doesn't. And it probably would not.
Okay.
But the impact fee amounts would be transferable.
Okay.
Or the credits for the impact fees would be transferable, assuming that you build the facilities to the quality and the standards that are required under state and local statute. So if the developer says you have a $20,000 or $25,000 student station cost, and I can deliver it for 18 or 20, if I meet all of the criteria and the school board and the county accept it, then there is a discount that they are able to obtain by providing the facilities at less cost of meeting the standard, which would, in the end of the day, lower the assessments for the future residents.
And my last question, because you talked about that time gap and making sure the seats were available when the students were there, although the assessments may be collected over time, and that they would bond, that amount would be bondable. That's a debt that was incurred, that bondable amount, that is for that district, that special district, not necessarily the school district.
Correct. It is not an obligation of the county or of the school district. It's an obligation which flows only back to the land.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Madam Superintendent, before we go further, Mr. Mathias being the person who brought this entity to us today, I believe you had another question?
Almost, it was almost.
It's almost what you were asking. How do we though protect the small business who can't do the district? How do we protect them? Can we give this benefit of spreading this debt over a long period of time? How do you balance that?
I don't have a good answer for that yet. That's something that I think we want to take a look at to see if there is a mechanism that could be created countywide or district-wide which would do that. And I don't know what that is yet, but we can take a look at it.
And you've never done that before, so,
I don't think so.
and you have no knowledge of this place to do that. Is that fine?
No, ma'am. We might do it,
No,
it wasn't fun.
I mean, it's a tricky situation because.
I heard him say it 3 times. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation because at the end of the day, the requirement to raise additional revenue is there. You need to raise that capital. So, the question is not so much. Now we've at least changed the frame of the reference of the question from how do I not pay to how do I pay over time, which is a little bit easier to swallow and easier to manage and helps you better in terms of funding. For a lot of people, we can help figure out a way to help them pay over time. Can we do it for everybody? I don't know yet.
Thank you very much. That was my exhaustion. Crown Ag Superintendent.
Yes, I'd like to make sure that Mr. Fix and Mrs. McLeod have an opportunity to ask any questions they might have from staff while we have a young man here that's an expert in this.
Absolutely, I want to say, not that it probably matters, but absolutely agree with everything that Mr. Geberer said today. And in terms of talking about the special assessment districts, their pros and cons, and the fact that, as you see up there, the impact fee or that methodology is part and parcel. It's part of this. And as Mr. Matthias, your whole quest, if you will, was how can we spread out the pain or payment of the impact fees over time? And that's when I referenced, there are these special taxing districts. I'd forgotten until he put it on the PowerPoint that in fact from the 2005 study that you all hired Pitch with, that in fact they reviewed, I'm not saying they necessarily agree with that review, but they reviewed the different funding mechanisms and so on and talked about some of the pros and cons of those. Some of the conditions have changed, but generally it's the same. I'd also forgotten that we had put here, and I'm so glad that we did, that it talks about the capital plan will list nearly $400 million in unfunded projects. Now, of course, that was from last year. And when it talks about that, that's not just talking about student stations needed for growth, but it's also talking about schools that need to be built because their time is there. Their 30 years, in some cases more than 30 years, are up. This is what's been presented to us. I have seen it be used successfully, but generally in very large developments. Now, why large developments? Well, our multiplier is about, and I'm going to round it up, it's about a 0.5, no, it's really 0.4, but about, let's just, for simple math, because I'm not a mathematician, think about 0.5 of a child per unit. Half of that is an elementary student, so a 0.25. And then and it's not exactly, but if you divide the other portion, about an eighth, and about an eighth, about an eighth middle, and about an eighth high school student. I only say that to point out to you that, so when you're talking about a development that would impact a whole elementary school, you're talking 4,000 units. About. And once again, I've simplified the math quite a bit. So it's generally very large developments, unless you can get a conglomerate, if you will, of adjacent developments to make a special assessment district. While we didn't have a special assessment district, we do have an example of 2 PUDs that were co-located next to each other in South End, Sawgrass Bay, and I know it's not Greater Pine, but I can't remember the name of it. But they came together, and in the middle of the 2, they jointly gave us that school site for Sawgrass Bay Elementary. Now, that's an example of where we could have probably, if we were of the mind at that time to have done so, we could have used maybe a special assessment district that would have incorporated 2 adjacent PDs. A couple of places where I know this has been used, or at least the Educational Facility Benefit District, one was Palo Longo, that was done in Osceola County, and the other was Floral Ridge, also in Osceola County, where they used the Educational Facility Benefit District. And there's, I think, one in Miami-Dade, it's an Educational Facility Benefit District, but I don't remember the name of that. But as was pointed out, there's other things that may even be more appealing. The MSDU, the Chapter 170 and the 190, because the Educational Facility Benefit District has some strings that those others don't have. So, thank you so much for the information you gave us. I think it was very spot on and very timely. It does what you're looking at, but as has been stated, the one limitation that I've known of so far is it doesn't get the ones and twos. I mean, I don't know if you can form a whole district-wide to capture those. I think that may take a little
You
extra
can.
work.
Actually, you can, the county does have the authority simply to impose an MSBU on a designated area. Community Development District requires 100% approval of landowners, which you would never get in a built populated area. But the county does have the authority simply to impose an MSBU and say, you're all under this umbrella. The question, I guess, then would be, would this apply to all existing development, or would it apply to just the new development? So,
Because then your impact fee methodology would need to be re-looked at.
but there is a way to create a district over a large area which doesn't require landowner approval, simply by the authority of the county to do so. And it's maybe not that simple on a political basis.
And if I may interject, when you say with countywide, if it covers a portion of the city, would the city also have to be in on that, or the county do it?
What was the answer? I'm sorry.
Yes.
The city would have to approve it?
Yes.
If it was the city?
If it's only within the city, then the city would do it. If it's across city-county borders, you probably need both city and county approval.
So hypothetically, if we said we needed $10,000, that your option could be as a home builder, I'm going to pay it up front, be done with it. Or can we offer this a la carte, we can say, I'm going to do it one of these other ones?
Right.
You could?
Yes. If we had a community development district or an MSBU, you could offer those options to that level.
And could the MSBU cover the county, and then you may have an education district that would be separate?
I believe so, yes.
But to do it countywide, we're saying that you have to have every municipality agree to that.
I think so. It's better than a lot of counties where they have 30 municipalities.
But where this could be a very good tool to look at in the future, for example, the sector plan, the Wellness Way, where they're looking at 16,000 acres, and they're not yet telling me how many units. I've thrown out the number 32, and they just got a grant, so it could be easily double that, and who knows. So, but this kind of thing would be a perfect tool. That's contiguous property that right now, if they were to increase the land use at all, it then takes this plan and I don't want to say makes it moot, but it throws this plan off because those are land use changes that we weren't envisioning when we put this together. So it's an additional impact on top of your concurrency, on top of your capital plan, and so on. So in my mind's eye, if nothing else, this would be a perfect tool to use in a situation like that.
The options we've talked about, they need to be approved by municipalities or county government or the developer establishing the boards. Is that correct?
Right.
Ms. McLeod, did you have any from a
covered
financial
most
standpoint?
of the ones I had, and my question was that who had to authorize it? This is not something our board can go out and do or get any works on their own. They've got to have the county and or the city to actually do the approval. How does it work?
For an MSBU or...
Can you use the microphone, please?
For an MSBU or a community development district, I'm pretty sure that the city or the county involved will be the authorizing agency to form the district. I don't know if the school board has the authority to impose an MSBU.
I don't believe so.
And that the actual bonds themselves would not be the obligation of the school district?
Correct. For a community development district, there would be an obligation of the lands within the district.
I have one last question. If you were sitting right here, what would you do?
I would update my impact fee ordinance. And I would meet with all of the approved residential communities, 500 and 1,000 residential communities, and encourage them to create some form of a special district, either educational facilities or CDD, to lessen the burden on the homeowner and to lower the mortgage price and to lower the home price, and give them the opportunity to pay that assessment over time. Those would be the first few steps. And then I would explore that, the question that board member Stevender suggested, which is there a way to encompass the small builders, the 1 and 2 home builders, to give them find some mechanism that enables them to stretch out impact fee payments over time in the same fashion that a special district could do. So I would be sort of the 4th or 5th step, which is a little research to figure it out. If we can do something more than just CDDs or MSBs.
Thank you very much. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, this was a presentation for your information and to ask questions. At this point in time, board members, you need to come to consensus on what you would like to have communicated to the Board of County Commissioners. Basically, at this point in time, I have a draft of a letter based on the last action we took, which was on the July 22nd of that meeting. You have a copy of that. I provided that copy to you. Based on the information you received today, I need to know if there's something different that you want to communicate, or if this is the letter you're authorizing, and Ms. Fisher will give it for your signature as the board chair. I heard the response to Mr. Mathias's last question, and I heard that first you would update the impact fee ordinance. That is the ordinance, I believe, that is owned by the Board of County Commissioners. So if that is something that you're wanting to give them input on, then that has to be communicated to them. And then the question would be, what is it you want them to update it to? Or how would you like them to update it? Then they're going to want your input on that if that's the step you need to take. So at this time, the staff, as a staff, we are working on your last directive as a board based on the vote that was taken. You have a sample draft letter of that action. And again, before we leave today, I need to know what that letter needs to say, if it stands as it is, or if it is to be revised.
Ms. Fisher, can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Steinberg.
Dr. Moxley, a couple meetings ago, Mrs. McLeod sat there and talk to us about possibly paying off one or two of our bonds. Now, can you share with the board and with the people in the audience what that, how we were to make up those numbers in order to pay off one or two? Because I know that there was some impact fee dollars that were factored into that conversation that we had.
Ms. Brandenburger, members of the board, based on our last discussion about the capital budget and our capital plan, and we talked a little bit about the paying off of the sales tax bonds, and if you'll remember, we had an option B and an option C, and option B was to pay both bonds off, and that dipped into a lot of the capital dollars that we had in reserve. Option C was to pay off one and not pay off the second one that had the 1.2% interest rate. And we have to do that by October if we're going to do that. So we had some time to build that recommendation. After this last discussion, Mrs. McLeod and Mr. Fix, who work with our capital plan and our capital budget, one of the things that we looked at, and we went back and said, in that capital budget, in that 5-year span, in the outer years, there is, I believe, a $4 million revenue fee or identification of revenue for future impact fee dollars that would be collected or had the potential of being collected. If the recommendation is not to do any type of an impact fee in any shape or form, or even if you did and the county commissioners did not reinstitute one, then we need to remove that $4 million from that proposed capital, $4.6 million, thank you for the exact amount, from the proposed draft of that capital plan, which will then further reduce your reserves in your capital budget by that $4.6 million. And at that point in time, we don't have the amount of money that would be needed to pay off either one of them without getting reworking that whole plan. So that has a significant impact.
You heard the superintendent's comment, board members. You heard my comments last week, and I definitely am in opposition to impact fees. That remains intact. And I'm in a position to hear your motion, see if you intend to accept this letter to be presented to the county commission, or if you would, through a consensus statement, want to present another letter. Yes.
My issue with this is basically, this is a math problem, and how we tackle it. I mean, we've been given some other options, but to me, I'm not sure how we sit on this. We know that in Four Corners is going to be a transitional school. It's going to have to be at least the planning stages within the next 3 to 5 years, period. We know that's coming. That's $30 million. We need a funding stream for that. I mean, even if we said nothing else, there is one school that needs a funding stream. If we're going, I am comfortable with saying that there's a special district in that area or whatever it may be, but to kick this can, so to say, is not acceptable. There's no way that we can do that and run the entire South Lake community into concurrency, because we have some of those areas that are close. And when we start talking about this, I just need to know, is there a funding source where we can get $30 million in the next 4 years? And if there's not, we have some issues. I mean, as a board, and I don't know how we move forward without that. And to put this off for another year, even if it is $5 or $6 million, is another year that's pushed out. And where are we going to put those students? I don't think anybody wants to go back to the days when we had year-round school, or the special sessions and alternative scheduling and all of that. I lived through that as well. And if we want to have folks who want to move to Lake County and want to use our school systems, they have to be user-friendly. And going to special scheduling is not very user-friendly. It was very difficult on parents, teachers, and students. And so we need to make sure that we do have funding streams for those facilities. And what that is, I don't know. But what I can say is that we know that there's not one, and doing nothing is not going to fix that problem.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, Ms. Brandon.
I am not in favor of this letter as it is currently written. I don't know how many of you received Jimmy Connor's email from the Connor report, and he stated very frankly in there that he will not support an impact fee if there is not a recommendation made by the school board. And I don't see the county commission doing that for us if we're not willing to put on the table a recommendation of what we want to happen. And I'm not quite sure that they'd be willing to sit down with us without us having a recommendation to even talk about these other options that have been presented to us today. I don't see it happening, and it will continue for us to kick this can down the road. We will be sitting here again next year and possibly the year after, and I think we are doing an injustice to the school system, and I appreciate the teacher who came to speak to us today, because I know that resonates with a lot of teachers and a lot of people. And we have a job that we need to be doing, and zero is not the answer. And so until we're willing as a board to come forth with an actual number, we're going to be continuing with this discussion and asking, why won't the county commissioners meet with us?
One thing I will say is that we can give them anything that we want. What we need to do is put forth a proposal that they can actually vote for. And we know that they're doing separated districts within transportation already. To think that they're going to go countywide, I think is a stretch, because if we're reading the tea leaves of what they're already doing, they can't come to that conclusion, and they're surely not going to do that for us. I still think that it's the South End that's going to be in that issue, and I can still support one down there while we work through the rest of this. But I also can't support one countywide because there are areas that are still in economic peril. So I think we're still kind of where we were at.
Mr. Geberer, what was the comment that you had made with regards to whether an impact fee would be countywide or by district?
My feeling, my belief is that the state may require that you impose the same fee for the same area. I mean, the capital millage rate is a capital millage rate that's imposed for the school board is imposed at the county level, and it's a requirement that is dictated by the state, as is the operating millage dictated by the state, and it's applied countywide. So my feeling is that in all likelihood the state would require that you have one impact fee zone and one fee that doesn't change from zone to zone. But thinking about it, there are places like northwest St. Johns County, which was a bedroom community along Highway 16, which was very suburban and very primary household worker oriented. They had 0.8 kids per household, when the rest of St. Johns County had 0.4 kids per household. and they imposed a fiscal impact requirement on Northwest St. Johns County that they meet other fiscal requirements, which had to do with the differential in school facilities and kids per household. So there may well be a basis to say you can have different impact fees within a county based on the experience in Northwest St. John's.
I just wanted to say, when you had made that comment before, Todd, I called the county to find out about the impact fee, and it is countywide. The transportation is going in countywide. They may be working on something else that's special for like Wellness Way or something else in the South End, but the head of the Department of Public Works told me that it was done countywide.
Board members, yes. Mr. Fix.
And I was going to say, one of the reasons too that sometimes looking at different fees for roads in different areas is allowable is because there is some allowance to have constrained roadways in certain areas and to allow for different levels of service. When we went to do school concurrency, when we set up our concurrency service areas, I initially wanted to set up different levels of service in our concurrency service areas as we would build a capital plan that would get us to an equal LOS all the way across our district, recognizing where we were at that time and getting there. The state said no. DCA said, or DCA at that time said, you have to provide a uniform level of service. Now, I'm not trying to make the argument one way or the other on the impact fee, but I'm just saying on the level of service, which is part of the methodology that goes into establishing an impact fee. That's what they said was at that time. And bear in mind, I just want to point out that these special assessment districts, once again, the methodology of an impact fee plays a role in all of this as well.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And to that end, you're spot on. The very first thing it seems to me is we need to recognize what the number is. What is that number, that impact fee number? We have a study dated 2011 that is $10,292. So then, how do we get there? Seems to be then what we need to be discussing.
But there were two questions. One is, do you want one? And then the second question.
I'm not worried about their question.
I'm just worried about us.
Oh, yes.
That from a position standpoint, it seems like that in your letter to me isn't far off to me, but that we recognize that there is a number. Now, everyone doesn't agree on that number. We have it from the study that Henderson and Young. But if we set forth to qualify the impact fee number first, and then said we recommend, because I don't disagree with you, Ms. Fisher, that just going with strictly impact fee could be punitive, but if we then can reach, how do we then go through which assessment works? How are we the fairest to everyone in Lake County, collecting the right amount of money? And the history seems to be that we never quite got the right amount.
I think there's another issue too, and Mr. Geberer mentioned an up-to-date assessment of what that impact fee should be. And the impact fees in the past, they've always been based on materials of at least a year past. When you do that, your market for construction has already advanced, and your need has already advanced. And I will speak to that, and I believe, sir, that's exactly what you said, but I said it in layman's terms.
But who does that? The county commission does this update?
No. We pay for our portion of an impact fee study.
Which is that Henderson Young that we already have.
Which is $93,000 before we pay for it.
Which the impact fee ordinance for educational impact fees doesn't allow for that study will be paid out of your impact fees. However, if the counties impact fee ordinances for their things, it does allow that. So they can use impact fee dollars to pay for their impact fee studies. You can't.
Rather than doing a study, could you have the best and brightest and like kind of look at it and go, 10,000 is not right, maybe 89? No.
Well, we've heard from the best and brightest in Lake County, and you know, I always believe that they're right, but it's not this figure. And there are issues. There are issues that always get compacted and cause more problems. I think what you have brought to the table today is very, very good. I still say you have a letter in front of you. Growth in the county is apparently in the south end of this county. I don't want to see growth impacted. I don't want to see our students impacted. And the only way that I see to handle this is to say no to this impact fee right now. We've let the county commission that come to us with a request. We said we would review it in 6 months. We can still have another increment of 6 months. And that may give you time to work further with Mr. Geberer, to work further with individuals that could give you expert input. In the audience today, we have our bonding agency, correct?
We do. We have Mr. Moore, I believe.
Mr. Moore is here.
Yes.
He's always given us good advice. I am truly in a position where I feel like, you know, our free and reduced lunch rates continue to go up. Unemployment has certainly not dipped. We have issues, and those are the parents of our students. So I'm just not in favor of it. And please come forward with your request. I respect you. I want you to do what you feel is best.
Well, I guess the question is, if we were to say we want another study, and we spent the $93,000 plus of what it would cost, and the number came back at 10,000 or even higher, then what are we going to do? Are we going to sit here again and say, well, we don't agree with the number, but we just spent all this money? And to say we can look at this again in 6 more months? Hey, we can look at it again 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you know, however often. But the thing is, growth is coming back. We have houses being built, and we may not have schools for those students to attend. And then we're going to have to look at portables, year-round schools. And, you know, it's a difficult position, but it's one that we have to come up with a number while we are looking at these special assessments and other things that can be done.
In light of that, maybe the first thing on the list is going to update the impact fee study. Just move forward with meeting with developers, offering alternatives. I mean, I think your point's well taken that it's very unlikely that a new impact fee study is going to come back and say, oh, we were wrong and it should only be $5,000. The numbers are going to go up. And you'll have the opportunity to make that number go up over the next couple of years as well. But you're probably not going to get any greater clarity. You're only going to get a higher number.
Board members.
And my issue is what happens when we run into concurrency. And there is no answer, and for us just, for nothing to be done, then we stare down the barrel of concurrency. You know, we just had the 100 luxury apartments turned down. Looking at this 1,000, I know there's other, we've got the sector plan coming up. We're looking at a lot of growth and no way to deal with it. And, you know, of course, the county wants to move forward and to push their economic development. The city is, the Chamber of Commerce is. You know, City of Claremont is concerned that we're not going to have these seats. That was some of their comments when they turned down the luxury apartments. You know, for us to have nothing in place, it's going to create a problem for the South End. That's just the honest truth. And we have to find a solution.
Well, I think that Mr. Mathias has brought us some input tonight that we needed to hear. The former board had heard very similar information in the past. You need to work with each other, and I'm ready for a motion. I'm ready for a statement about this letter. Otherwise, we're quiet and nothing is getting accomplished. Sure, ma'am.
I think that the school board should recognize in the letter that the Henderson Young, as was presented, as a number. That I think based on the presentation, that we should encourage the county commission to sit down with us, and that we would look at these economic districts, and that we would do that in the next 30 days.
So are you saying that the number that's in the study?
Okay, he's made a motion. Is there a second? And then we can question.
Second for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I know you find that cumbersome, but in the end, when it's not clear,
No,
then there
that's
is
fine.
an issue.
No,
I'm good because I don't even tell you that.
I'm fine with that. So are you saying that we would reference the study done by Henderson Young and the number that was given of $10,292?
That's correct.
Okay.
But I'm using impact fee assessments, not impact fees. Is I guess the main statement.
But we're looking at that longer term than shorter term to help with the issues at hand.
No, I'm saying the next 30 days we get the additional help. Even if they put impact fees in, it would be January anyway, right? It would be January anyway.
Right, no, it would be January.
So if we go ahead and say we're going to do impact fee assessments, we have all the mechanisms in place, we could kick it off in January, right?
Impact fees or assessments.
And I'm really going for the impact assessment, and it would either be countywide, BSU or whatever, or these economic or education districts. And that mechanism would already be in place and ready to implement.
Okay, but going back to what he was sharing, we would have to talk to the developers, we'd have to talk to the municipalities, we would have to talk to the county.
That's what he encourages. Right?
Well, he encouraged us to do that, but that could take much longer than a January 1 start date. And my thing is, what are we going to do in the interim while we are pursuing those options?
Well, I mean, to think that this would be date sensitive, that we would, everything we need to do, we need to agree that we have done and in place by January.
We've got a lot of moving parts there, and depending on 14 municipalities in a county.
Well, the reality though is you're not going to get $10,000 number from the county commission. You'll be lucky to get two.
And that's the problem. I mean, 2,000 isn't going to raise 30 million in 4 years, so we still have that problem. And that's where I agree with Bill in that we have to have a number that we can get to that we can meet these needs. You know, I'd be comfortable with that, because even if it's not done by January 1, we're moving through the process, and to move to some type of an assessment, even if, you know, if we start looking at the MSBU on designated geography, you know, that puts in some sort of an assessment. But I'm comfortable with that if that's, you know, if the rest of the board can move there. You know, that settles a lot of issues for a lot of folks, and it gets us moving, and we can start having our time with the county commission to try to shape this in a way that would work for both of us. But I'm not concerned about January. I mean, even if it's 3 extra months, we still need to get moving in the direction.
Oh, we must
And that's-
definitely have to get moving.
Can we move from 30 days to January?
Well, he said 6 months, so I think
Yeah.
we need to go
Okay,
ahead and.
He didn't initially say
No,
six.
no, I meant, what I meant was 30 days for our first
No, no, no,
meeting,
no.
for a joint meeting.
Mr. Kirby said it takes 4 to 6 months to get it done.
Okay, and he's not a member of the board, I'm sworn by Mr. Mathias.
I just wanted 30 days for us to have a set to.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know about the mechanics.
Do you still want to set to?
Yes, ma'am. I think we sure, we need that.
Dive.
I just would like the motion clarified.
Well, it certainly is complicated at the moment. We would, this is what I hear from Mr. Mathias, that he does seem to respect the Henderson Young document, and he accepts the $10,292. He would like to have a meeting with the county commission to discuss how we get to $10,292. Is that correct, Mr. Mathias?
Through the assessments, be it either an education or any one of the models that were presented.
Okay.
But it would be an assessment, not an impact fee.
And I'm glad
I want it
you
clarified.
said that, because in the first presentation, you said impact fee, yes.
I'm sorry, no, that's a bad word.
And it is not then time other than you would like to meet with the county commission within 30 days.
Yeah, within 30 days to react to this letter, because if not, we may want to make another decision. If we can't get through this process, then we're going to have to make another decision to fund based on the new agreement.
Okay, and that was seconded by Dr. Howard?
Yes.
Correct. Madam Superintendent, you have it?
I do.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, aye. 3 to 2. And that's where we were a week ago.
If I understood correctly, that motion failed.
No, it
It
passed.
passed, okay, I didn't
You know
hear
what,
where the
I
3 and the 2s
supported
were.
it because we need to get moving on this. And if we
Okay.
can get a meeting with the county commission, then I'm all in favor of that. I want to see something happen, but to think that we're not going, that the zero's going to be, is the number, I'm sick over that.
So I'm sending the corrected letter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Board members, thank you for working together. And this will not be sent, so I give that back to you. Any further public comments? There not being any board member comments?
Yes, ma'am. I did send down, or handed down, this one's yours, Ms. Fisher, an article that came out in the school bus fleet about how to fine-tune bell times for bus efficiency, since we're looking at all of those items, and I did give the staff a copy.
And, Ms. Brandenburg? Anything? Dr. Howard?
Nope.
Anything? Mr. Mathias? Certainly getting a lot of phone calls on transportation issues. Enjoyed stepping out with the stars, and Mr. Mathias, I'm sorry you weren't there. It was a great evening, and those that won, once again, a member of the Macklin firm. So we appreciate that. Stacy did a fine job. Stephanie. Stacy did too.